Amendment that would only allow the NSA to gather information on suspects of terrorism, which is what they should do, rather than on everybody and stockpile it. So that was a great concern. Not that I think they're abusing that information, I don't, but I worry about what future governments or what our federal government could do with that information about who you've called and perhaps more, but at least what's been reported. We'll get to everybody and we'll kind of start over here. Yes.
All right, my name is Darren O'Connor. I work with a group called Colorado Foreclosure Resistance Coalition. Almost a year ago, we went to Idaho Springs for a 63-year-old grandmother who was evicted from her home. She lived in that home for 24 years, and during that eviction, we did an eviction resistance where a bunch of us showed up. And before we did that, we went to the police station in Idaho Springs and asked them to not do that because she was still in court. And to make a long story short, there were a lot of misbehaviors on the bank's part that she was fighting in court. But regardless of that, we have House Bill 06-1387 and a few other laws that were passed by foreclosure attorneys that have made it really easy to kick people out of their homes, even if the banks can't prove that they own their homes. I was faced with a Tri-County SWAT team that showed up, 25 people who looked like they were dressed for Afghanistan, took me and this 63-year-old woman. They broke down her door and threw her to the floor of her own home.
And this all was in where? In
Idaho Springs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so here's a couple of parts. Obviously, that sounds like overkill in terms of evicting you. I mean, people have eviction notices. We'll talk about how they get there. I don't know why they would send heavily armored people there unless they thought I don't know what. Normally, they'd knock on your door and say you have to leave. And by the way, we have a nice officer here from Lafayette PD. Let's give him a round. So I hope you reported that to their superiors, because that doesn't sound like that was a normal eviction where you have a SWAT team. I don't know why you would do that. Now, how do you get to eviction? This is the issue of how we deal with kind of the housing crisis we've had. There's not an easy answer to this. So I mean, obviously, just like let's talk about it briefly from a policy perspective. First of all, is Danielle Henry here? Down from my office?
No,
So we have a specialist who helps on these types of issues. So if you're dealing with, there's a maze now of federal programs that may or may not help you, but they have helped some constituents stay in their home and get a second chance. Also, if there's a short sale you're trying to do, anyway, we help with those with our office. The trade-off, as you all understand, is if you make it harder, let's just take the extreme. Say you say banks can't foreclose; they're just out the money if you don't pay your mortgage. Everybody else would have much higher mortgage rates as a result, and that's the trade-off. Now, I'm not saying that we're necessarily in the exact place now. I certainly don't think that banks shouldn't be able to foreclose. That would make home ownership less affordable for everybody else because they'd have to eat the losses and pass them along to everybody else. That's what banks do. That's just what they would do. So, where are we today? Have banks behaved in ways that seem dumb at times? Absolutely. I haven't figured out a simple silver bullet to fix it.
Well, I think that what one of the points that needs to be made, and there's a request to you as well, but in Colorado, that bill that I mentioned, 1387 from 2006, makes it so that banks don't have to prove that they own the loan, and we have had people who've had over 10 banks showing up in court saying they're going to foreclose on them. The law in Colorado in from 86 to that 2006 period, I believe it was, allowed for people to say, first, prove to me you own the loan. And we all know Mortgage Electronic Registration System, MERS, was put in place so that when all of these loans were bundled and put into trusts, they weren't properly transferred, which is why banks can't show up and prove that they own it. And I'll just put my question out to you. Ed DeMarco, head of the FHA, his own people at Fannie Mae did a study that showed if we dropped the price of mortgages and remortgaged to people at the price of their homes who are underwater, who owe more than their home is now worth, even if they dropped those prices, they would make more money than they would by foreclosing. And the banks that you're talking about who have a right to make money and they're suffering losses, the losses aren't true because we have things like
So you have some good ideas. Christine, if you could come over for both of these folks, actually, the fellow that's the first question too, because we want to put you in touch with the right person on my staff on both these issues. You're going to talk to Daniel Henry, and he should talk to Shad Marib in DC about the international treaty issue.
And do you have an
we have a
opinion?
housing specialist in our staff.
Great. And do you have an opinion on Ed DeMarco, who runs the FHA, and Mel Watts is now Obama's desired person? Okay.
I know Mel. I don't. The current guy.
Right. And so we need to get in front of DeMarco, who is saying, even though we know money would be
I
saved.
can help more with the Mel Watt, the new guy, because I know him well. He's a colleague of mine. He's a congressman who's just appointed to be head of HUD. So we can make sure that you'll talk to my staff person, and we will help you then talk to him or his chief of staff or whoever it is to figure out what's going on.
And is there a way we can work to support you to make that change in the head of the FHA?
Well, President Obama gets to do that, right? So I don't get to. We do the oversight. So what you could give me, this is how it would help, is I get to meet these folks and question them and talk to them. So you can tell me, ask the head of the FHA this question. That's about the extent of that's how you can help me. So.
Well, the other,
so
and I'll stop. I promise I'll stop. But the problem with getting Mel Watts in is the problem with all of these heads of different groups that Obama's tried to get in is the Republicans refuse to have an up or down vote, and so they just stay in. So we've had DeMarco now for what, 6 years?
Yeah, as I said, I've met him twice. I don't know him well, but if this is a role that I can play as your congressman. We do oversight. So I mean, they work for the executive. They don't work for us. Their salaries come, their funding for the agencies come through us, but oversight. So I get to ask the tough questions to these guys, and you have to give me the tough questions. I mean, some of them I come up with on my own. I've asked that some of you might have seen the video that went viral. I questioned the DEA woman about some stuff, and I've Attorney General I've questioned about some stuff. But you have ideas, let them know. Okay, thank you. But you'll be in touch with Daniel Henry on my staff. We'll get the specifics. Yes.
Hi, I'm Janine Baker. I'm in Colorado.
Where from?
I came here from Idaho.
Welcome to Colorado.
Thank you. I like it a lot. I would like to respectfully take issue with you about what you said about the NSA and feeling like people aren't abusing it. I think the proof of that is that it's come out recently that they're using those dragnets to feed into domestic law enforcement and using that information to spy on people, Americans, and then covering up the fact that the original information came from the NSA.
So I don't think